The rain wasn't just water. It was humiliation, falling in cold, stinging sheets. Standing on the curb, drenched to the bone, Anna Peterson watched her husband, Mark, shield his mistress, Chloe, with the very umbrella she had bought him for his birthday. He didn't even look back as his BMW sped off, its red tail lights disappearing into the storm, leaving Anna with a dead phone, a soaking wet, thin dress, and a life that had just shattered into 1,000,000 pieces. He had just traded in his loyal, supportive wife for a newer, flashier model. But he made one critical, life-altering mistake. He didn't just abandon Anna. He abandoned the person who would one day hold his entire future in her hands. And 5 years later, when he walks in begging for a job, he'll find out exactly who he's begging. The chandeliers at La Fontaine dripped crystals, but to Anna, they felt like accusations. Each one seemed to mock her sensible brown dress, the one she'd worn to 3 other important client dinners this year. Beside her, her husband, Mark Peterson, was electric. He was a shark in a tailored suit, his laugh booming as he charmed the table. Anna just felt like a goldfish, trapped in a tiny, ornate bowl. Mark was a senior manager at a high-flying finance firm, and tonight was about landing the Stratton account, and the Stratton account came in the form of Chloe Stratton. Chloe was everything Anna was not. Her hair was a shade of platinum blonde that probably cost more than Anna's monthly grocery budget. Her dress was black, backless, and whispered, "Danger," while Anna's screamed, "Reliable." Chloe's laughter was a high, tinkling sound that made Mark lean in, his hand brushing her arm, his eyes lingering. "Anna is just so supportive," Mark said, raising his glass in a toast that felt more like a eulogy. "She handles everything at home so I can focus on, well, this." "How domestic," Chloe said, her red-painted lips curving into a smile that didn't reach her cold, blue eyes. She looked at Anna. "What is it you do, Anna?" "Mark never says." "Oh, I used to work in admin," Anna said, her voice small. "But I've been focusing on helping Mark, and I do some gardening. I have a small blog." Mark cut her off with a laugh. "She has a dirt blog, talks to her plants. It's adorable." The table chuckled, and Anna felt a familiar heat rise in her cheeks. It wasn't a dirt blog. It was a horticultural journal. She had a certification in sustainable landscape design, a passion she'd put on hold to type up Mark's reports and iron his shirts when he was just a junior analyst. She'd managed their tiny budget, sacrificing her own small ambitions so he could buy the suits, join the golf club, and become the man he was today. A man who was currently letting Chloe Stratton feed him an olive from her martini. The dinner ended. A valet pulled up Mark's gleaming black BMW 5 Series, the car they had bought to celebrate his promotion, the one Anna had argued was too much, but had conceded on. As they stepped outside, the sky opened. It wasn't a drizzle. It was a deluge, a cold, aggressive November rain that seemed to come from all directions. "Damn," Mark said, looking at Chloe's thin, expensive shoes. "You'll be ruined." "Oh, Mark, you're a lifesaver," Chloe purred, huddling against his side. Mark turned to Anna. His expression was one of mild inconvenience, as if she were a forgotten umbrella. "Anna, listen. Chloe lives uptown. It's the complete opposite direction from our place. I'm going to drop her home first." "But it's pouring, Mark," Anna said, shivering as the first drops hit her shoulders. "It's freezing." I know, he said impatiently. He reached into the car and pulled out the large black and green golf umbrella, the one she'd bought him. Anna reached for it, a small sigh of relief on her lips, but Mark didn't hand it to her. He walked past her, opened the umbrella, and held it over Chloe Stratton, guiding her to the passenger side. He opened the door, tucked her in, and shut it, all without a single glance back at his wife. He rounded the car, the umbrella still shielding the car more than himself, and got into the driver's seat. He rolled down the passenger window. Chloe looked out, her expression a perfect mask of insincere pity. "Oh, Anna, are you sure you'll be okay? It's just such an awful night." Mark, wait," Anna said, her voice trembling. "My phone's dead. I don't have any cash for a cab. You have the joint card." Mark sighed, a sound of pure, unadulterated annoyance. He looked at Chloe, then back at Anna. "God, Anna, don't be so dramatic. It's just rain. Walk to the bus stop. It's only a few blocks. I can't be late. Chloe has an early meeting." He didn't even say goodbye. He just rolled up the window. Anna stood there, frozen, as the BMW pulled away. The red tail lights reflected in the growing puddle at her feet. She watched them turn the corner, leaving her alone on a dark street, in a dress that was now plastered to her skin. The cold was instant, seeping into her bones, but it was nothing compared to the ice forming in her heart. He hadn't just left her. He had chosen. She started to walk. It wasn't a few blocks to the bus stop. It was 12. The bus wouldn't come for another 40 minutes. She walked, her sensible shoes squelched. Her hair was a matted mess. Makeup she didn't even remember putting on ran down her face. By the time she fumbled for her house keys, 2 hours later, she was a shaking, hypothermic wreck. The house was dark. Empty. He wasn't home. She sat in the dark, cold kitchen, dripping water onto the tiles she had scrubbed on her hands and knees last weekend. She didn't cry. She just sat. And she waited. He came home at 3 a.m. He smelled of Chloe's perfume and expensive whiskey. "Why are you sitting in the dark?" he snapped, flicking on the light. He recoiled. "My God, Anna, you look pathetic." "What, did you walk home?" "You left me," she whispered, her voice raw. "I told you I had to take a client home," he said, yanking off his tie. "She's not a client, Mark. She's your mistress." The words hung in the air, sterile and sharp. Mark stopped. He didn't deny it. He didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. He just looked tired. Tired of her. "So what if she is?" he said, his voice low and dangerous. "At least she's interesting. At least she has a life. What do you have, Anna? Your stupid plants? Your little blog that nobody reads? I've been carrying you for 10 years. I'm done." He walked past her and went upstairs. She heard the guest room door click shut. Not their bedroom, the guest room. Anna sat in the kitchen until the sun came up, the cold from the rain finally replaced by a burning, clarifying rage. He was right about one thing. He was done. But so was she. The divorce was not a clean break. It was an amputation, and Mark brought a rusty saw. He filed first. By 9 a.m. the next morning, while Anna was still numbly trying to scrub the mud from her shoes, a process server knocked on the door. Mark, it turned out, had been planning this for months. His lawyer was a piranha named Harrison, who immediately filed to have their joint accounts frozen, arguing that Anna was unstable and might dissipate marital assets. This left Anna with $42.50 in her purse and a half-tank of gas in her 10-year-old Honda. "He'll give you a one-time payout of $20,000, her own overworked, court-appointed lawyer, a woman named Beth, explained over a crackling phone line. He's claiming his finance job is unstable and that the house is a business expense since he hosts clients. He's also claiming you have no claim to his future earnings, as you provided no support to his career. He's offering you the Honda and your personal items." "No support?" Anna's voice was hollow. I I paid for his MBA. I worked 2 jobs. I know, Beth said, sighing. But he has documentation, emails where you offered to pay. He's framing it as a gift. His lawyer is good, Anna. Harrison will drag you through a 2-year discovery process until you're bankrupt. He'll put your dirt blog on trial and call you a kept woman with a hobby. Is that what you want? No. What she wanted was to disappear. She took the $20,000. She signed the papers. She watched as Chloe's white convertible was parked in her driveway before the ink was even dry. Anna moved into a cramped, 1-bedroom apartment on the industrial side of Portland. The walls were thin, the carpet smelled of stale cigarettes, and her only view was a brick wall. The $20,000 after the deposit and first and last month's rent looked terrifyingly small. For the first month, she barely moved. She lived on canned soup and toast. The grief was a physical weight, pushing her down into the lumpy second-hand mattress. She was 34 years old, divorced, broke, and had a 5-year gap on her resume that she'd filled with supporting her husband. She saw them once. She was in a CVS, buying generic brand toothpaste, when they walked in. Chloe was laughing, hanging on Mark's arm. He was beaming, looking 10 years younger. He bought a pack of gum, paid with his black Amex, and didn't even see Anna standing in the cold and flu aisle, hiding behind a display of cough drops. Seeing him so happy, so unbothered, was the final, brutal twist of the knife. It broke something in her. But as the broken pieces settled, they reformed into something hard and sharp. Rage. She went home, threw out the canned soup, and opened her laptop. Her blog, Urban Eden, was still there. It had 72 followers. She looked at her last post, written 6 months ago, about the rooting hormones in willow bark. Pathetic, she muttered, echoing Mark's words. She deleted the post. She deleted all the posts. She stared at the blank white screen. What is it you do, Anna? Chloe's voice. A dirt blog, Mark's voice. Fine, she said to the empty room. She created a new post. The title was simple. How to build a vertical garden for under $50. She spent the last of her $42.50 at the hardware store, came back to her tiny, depressing balcony, and she built it. She filmed it all on her old smartphone, editing the simple, clear, no-nonsense video until 3 a.m. She posted it. Then she went online and applied for a job. She was hired at Green Thumb Gardens, a sprawling, slightly run-down local nursery. The owner, a tough-as-nails woman in her 60s named Mrs. Petrov, looked at Anna's soft hands and sighed. You're not afraid of dirt, are you, city girl? Mrs. Petrov asked, her accent thick. No, ma'am, Anna said. Good. You start tomorrow, 6 a.m., unloading the mulch. The work was back-breaking. It was also life-saving. Anna hauled bags of soil, pruned roses until her fingers bled, and learned the gritty, practical side of the business. She learned about inventory, profit margins, and the devastating cost of a spider mite infestation. Mrs. Petrov was a harsh teacher, but a fair one. She saw Anna's passion and her hidden, encyclopedic knowledge. You have the eye, girlie, Mrs. Petrov said one afternoon, watching Anna create a stunning container garden from seemingly random plants. You see the structure of the plant, not just the flower. Most people don't have that. Meanwhile, her video got 1,000 views, then 10,000. People liked her calm, no gimmicks approach. She made another video. 5 house plants you can't kill. That one got 50,000 views. She saved every single penny. She ate rice and beans. She didn't buy a single new item of clothing. Her life was work, film, edit, sleep, repeat. 6 months into a new life, A man in a very expensive suit walked into Green Thumb Gardens. He looked lost, staring at a rack of pansies. "Can I help you?" Anna asked, brushing soil from her jeans. I'm not sure," he said, his voice deep and smooth. "I was sent to get something nice for the office." "What direction does the office window face?" Anna asked. He blinked. I think east?" "East. Good morning, son. Not too harsh. You want something that thrives on a little neglect, because let's be honest, you're not going to remember to water it," Anna said, a small smile playing on her lips. He laughed, a real, surprised laugh. "You're good. I'm Anna. Robert Ashford." She led him to the Zamioculcas, Zezi plants, and the Sansevieria, explaining their low-light, low-water needs. He was fascinated, not by the plants, but by her. "You're not just a salesperson, are you?" he said. "I'm a horticulturalist," she said, the word feeling solid in her mouth. He bought 3 plants. He came back a week later for more. He came back the week after that, just to talk. He was the CEO of Ashford Holdings, a major real estate development firm. He was quiet, brilliant, and, as she learned, a recent widower who was pouring his grief into his work. One rainy Tuesday, he found her in the greenhouse, sketching. "What's that?" he asked. "Oh, just an idea," she said, embarrassed. "A green wall design for a corporate lobby. It uses recycled grey water from the building's drainage. It's just a dream." Robert Ashford looked at her sketch. He looked at the complex irrigation notes in the margins. He looked at her. "Anna," he said, his voice serious. "This isn't a dream. This is a blueprint. And I think I have the perfect building for it." The lobby of the new Ashford Tower was a cathedral of glass and steel, and it was Anna's first real test. Robert Ashford didn't just give her the job. He was a businessman. He'd said, "Show me a proposal, a budget, a 3D rendering. Pitch it to my board. If they buy it, the job is yours." For 3 weeks, Anna didn't sleep. She used her tiny savings to buy a refurbished computer and taught herself CAD software. She called suppliers, negotiated prices, and built a 1/20 scale model on her kitchen floor out of foam board and preserved moss. She walked into the Ashford Holdings boardroom wearing her one good suit, a $40 find from a thrift store expertly tailored by her, and faced a table of 12 skeptical men and women. She didn't talk about flowers. She talked about ROI. "The Urban Eden Wall, as I'm calling it," she began, her voice shaking only slightly, "is not a decoration. It's an asset. It will improve indoor air quality by 22%, as certified by these studies. This will reduce employee sick days, projected to save the company $150,000 a year in lost productivity. It uses a patented grey water recycling system, which will cut the building's water bill by 8%, and it will be the single most Instagrammable lobby in the city, giving you hundreds of thousands in free, user-generated marketing." She didn't just get the job, she got a standing ovation. The installation was a nightmare, but a glorious one. She was on site for 72 hours straight, personally wiring the irrigation pumps and placing the final ferns. Robert Ashford showed up on the final night at 2 a.m. He wasn't wearing a suit, he was in jeans and a baseball cap, and he was carrying 2 large coffees and a box of donuts. "I figured you could use a break," he said, handing her a coffee. "I can't," she mumbled, covered in dirt and Teflon tape. "Pump 3B is leaking." He didn't leave. He rolled up his sleeves. "Show me," he said. They fixed the pump together, sitting on the marble floor at 4 a.m., sharing a donut. "You're not like other people, are you, Anna?" he said, watching her. "I'm just a gardener, Mr. Ashford." "No, you're not," he said, his voice soft. You're a builder. And please, call me Rob." The Urban Eden wall was a massive success. It was featured in Architectural Digest and Forbes. Suddenly, Anna wasn't just the girl from the nursery. She was Anna Peterson, founder of Urban Eden Designs. Her little blog? It was now a business website with a Contact Us page that was flooded with requests. Mrs. Petrov, seeing the writing on the wall, had sat Anna down. "Girlie, you are too big for my little pot. You need to be transplanted." She then offered Anna a deal. "You design a new, modern greenhouse for me, and I will give you the land behind the nursery to build your first office, a partnership." Anna built her office. It was small, made from 2 recycled shipping containers, but it was hers. She hired her first 2 employees. Robert became a fixture. He wasn't a whirlwind romance. He was slow, steady, and solid, like the oak trees he loved. He was the opposite of Mark. Mark had been all flash, all promises, all "look at me." Robert was all substance, all action, all "look at what we can build." He didn't woo her with expensive dinners at La Fontaine. He wooed her by showing up at her office with blueprints for a low-income housing project and asking, "How can we make this green? How can we give these families dignity and a place to grow their own food?" They bonded over spreadsheets and soil samples. Their first date was a walk-through of a derelict warehouse district. "I see a 10-acre park here," he said, "powered by solar, irrigated by rainwater." "I see native pollinators," she replied, "and a community garden with a program for local schools." He stopped, took her hands, which were, as always, smudged with dirt, and looked at her with an intensity that took her breath away. "I was married for 20 years, Anna," he said quietly. "My wife, Sarah, she was a wonderful woman. But when she passed, I thought the building part of my life was over. I thought I was just meant to maintain. But you make me want to build again." He wasn't proposing a marriage, not yet. He was proposing a partnership. A year later, Urban Eden Designs and Ashford Holdings broke ground on the Meadowbrook project, the nation's first fully sustainable mixed-use community. And in the middle of the muddy, chaotic construction site, surrounded by cranes and bulldozers, Robert Ashford got down on one knee. He didn't have a ring. He had a small, simple, perfectly formed acorn. "I know it's not a diamond," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "but I know you. You know that from this, the most magnificent, powerful, and enduring things can grow. Anna, will you grow with me?" Anna cried. She said yes. She was no longer Anna Peterson, the divorced woman from the industrial park. She was Anna Ashford, partner and co-designer, a woman who had built her new life from the ground up. While Anna was laying foundations, Mark Peterson was setting fires. His life with Chloe was exactly what he'd thought he wanted: fast, shiny, and expensive. They were the it couple, seen at every new restaurant opening, every exclusive party. Chloe, now free from the Stratton account, which she'd merely been a consultant for, not the heiress Mark had implied, was a full-time lifestyle influencer. This meant she spent Mark's money in exotic locations and tagged the brands. Mark's career, however, was built on the same foundation as his marriage, a series of risky, aggressive, and ultimately shallow moves. He was great at landing the kill. He was terrible at the long game. "Mark, this quarter's projections are ambitious," his boss, a silver-haired man named David, had warned him. "You're leveraging us pretty thin on the Tokyo market." "The market's a bull, David. You have to be a bull to ride it," Mark had replied, flashing his signature overconfident smile. He'd made Anna a gift, he told himself. He'd given her $20,000. It was more than she'd earned with her little plant hobby. He'd been generous. The fact that his bonus that quarter had been $300,000 was irrelevant. But the bull bucked. The Tokyo market didn't just correct, it collapsed. The ambitious projections became catastrophic losses. Mark's entire portfolio, built on high-risk, high-leverage trades, was wiped out in a single afternoon. He wasn't just reprimanded, he was fired. "You're a liability, Mark," David had told him, his face grim. "You didn't hedge, you didn't listen, you gambled and you lost." The firing came with a breach of fiduciary duty clause, which meant his license was suspended for 6 months, and his name was mud on Wall Street. He went home, expecting... what? Sympathy? Support? He found Chloe in the living room, surrounded by suitcases. "Oh good, you're here," she said, not looking up from her phone. "You can help the driver with the big one. It's Louis Vuitton." "Chloe." What's going on?" Mark asked, the blood draining from his face. "I'm leaving, Mark." "Duh," she said, as if explaining something to a child. "I just got an offer to co-host a travel show. It's 6 figures. Plus, you know, I'm bored." "Bored? We have a life together. I just lost my job, Chloe. I need you." Chloe finally looked at him. She let out that high, tinkling laugh, but this time it was just cold. "Oh, Mark. Sweet, simple Mark. You didn't lose your job. You are your job. And since you don't have one anymore, what's the point of you? You were fun when you were the hot-shot finance guy. Now you're just the guy. And I don't date just guys. But the house. Our money. The house is a rental, darling. The lease is in your name. And our money. You mean your money? The money you just lost? All my accounts are in my name. The influencing, the travel show, that's all me. I learned from you, Mark. Always have an exit strategy." She kissed him on the cheek, a dry, papery kiss. "Don't look so sad. It was a fun ride. Ciao." Mark Peterson stood in the middle of a rented house, surrounded by cheap, flashy furniture that Chloe had picked out, and realized he was, for the first time in his life, utterly and completely alone. The next 5 years were a slow, humiliating crawl downward. He couldn't get a job in finance. The black mark on his record was permanent. He had to sell the BMW to cover the penalties for breaking the lease. He tried consulting, but his bull attitude didn't work without the backing of a major firm. He was a salesman with nothing to sell. He burned through his savings. He moved from the rented mansion to a condo, to an apartment, to a room he rented in a house with 3 other consultants. He was 40 years old, wearing suits that were now 5 years out of style, trying to sell timeshares to people who didn't want them. He'd heard Anna had shacked up with some old money guy. He'd sneered at the time. Good for her, he'd told a mutual friend. She finally found another man to take care of her. He never once considered that she might be taking care of herself. One day, broke and nursing a cheap beer at a dive bar, he saw a magazine on the table. It was a copy of Forbes. The cover story, the Green Power couple, Robert and Anna Ashford, building a sustainable empire. He stared at the picture. Robert Ashford, he knew. Everyone knew. A titan, a billionaire. But the woman, he squinted. She looked familiar, poised, confident. Her hair was cut in a sleek, professional style. She was wearing a stunning, simple dress and was looking at Robert Ashford with a smile of partnership. He read the byline. Anna Ashford, founder of the multi-million-dollar Urban Eden Designs and C-suite partner at Ashford Holdings, is changing the way America builds. Mark dropped the magazine. His hands were shaking. It wasn't regret he felt. Not at first. It was a deep, primal, burning envy. She was supposed to be the dirt blogger. He was supposed to be the success. He had left her with nothing. How? How dare she build an empire without him? But then, a new, slower, more insidious thought crept in. A multi-million-dollar firm, C-suite partner, billionaire. She had always been a soft touch. She had loved him once. Surely that had to be worth something. He still had her old blog URL memorized. He typed it in. It redirected to a sleek, impressive corporate website. https:// or www.google.com search, or urbanedendesigns.com. He clicked Contact Us, and he began to type. The headquarters of Ashford Holdings was not a building, it was a statement. The Urban Eden wall in the lobby, once a single installation, had now been expanded into a 20-story living lung in the central atrium. Water recycled from the roof gardens trickled down granite faces, and the air smelled not of stale office coffee, but of fresh moss and damp earth. Anna Ashford's office was on the 48th floor, adjacent to Rob's. It wasn't a CEO's wife office, full of flowers and soft furniture. It was a command center. One wall was a floor-to-ceiling glass-paneled blueprint board. The other was a living wall of rare, experimental orchid hybrids she was cultivating herself. Her desk was a massive slab of reclaimed redwood, covered in landscape plans, soil reports, and 3 different computer monitors. She was no longer the mousy woman from La Fontaine. At 39, she was sleek, strong, and utterly in control. The confidence she radiated wasn't a mask. It was a foundation she had laid herself, one bag of mulch at a time. Her life with Rob was a true partnership. They had a 4-year-old daughter, Sophie, who had her mother's eye for plants and her father's stubborn determination. Life was good. It was busy. It was full. She was in the middle of a heated but friendly debate with her head of engineering about the load-bearing capacity of a rooftop garden in Seattle when her assistant, a sharp young man named David, buzzed her. "Mrs. Ashford, I'm sorry to interrupt. There's a Mark Peterson in the lobby." Anna froze. Her pen stopped moving over the blueprint. She hadn't heard that name, spoken aloud, in years. She hadn't seen him since that day in the CVS, all that time ago. "A Mark Peterson?" she repeated, her voice perfectly calm. "I don't have an appointment with anyone by that name." "I know, Ma'am," David said, his voice lowering. He says he's an old friend of yours. He's asking for a meeting. He says he sent you an email. Honestly, Ma'am, he seems a little desperate." The email. She vaguely recalled it. A rambling, overly familiar message from a generic consulting email address sent to the info address on her website. It had been full of remember whens and I'm in the neighborhood, and had a vague, oily pitch for synergy. She had deleted it without a second thought. A cold, familiar pit formed in her stomach. The old Anna, the one who lived in the industrial park, would have been terrified. She would have hidden. The new Anna, the one on the 48th floor, was just annoyed. "Thank you, David," she said, her voice crisp. "Tell Mr. Peterson I am in a board meeting for the rest of the day. If he has a business proposal, he can submit it through the proper channels on our website." "Yes, Ma'am." She turned back to her engineer. "Now, if we use a carbon fiber lattice instead of steel..." She was a professional. She had work to do. But an hour later, David buzzed again. "Mrs. Ashford, he's still here. He's refusing to leave. He's causing a scene, Ma'am. He's demanding to see you. He's telling our security guard, Mr. Johnson, that you're his ex-wife, and that you owe him." A red-hot flash of rage, the same rage that had fueled her on the night of the rain, shot through her. "Owe him." She stood up. "I'll handle this." "Anna, what's wrong?" Rob. He'd come in through their private connecting door, holding 2 cups of tea. He saw her face. "It's nothing, Rob. A ghost from my past," she said, trying to wave him off. "This ghost has a name?" he asked, not letting it go. He had seen the security alert on his own computer. "This Mark Peterson?" She nodded. Rob put the tea down. He straightened his tie. "All right, then we handle him together." "No, Rob," she said, putting her hand on his arm. "This is my debt to clear. He's not here for Anna Ashford, CEO. He's here for Anna Peterson, the pathetic girl with the dirt blog. She is the one who needs to walk out of that elevator. But I will be the one doing the talking." Rob looked at her, his eyes filled with a fierce, proud love. "Okay, but I'm watching from the security feed. You just say the word. Just look at camera 3, and I'll have security on him in a second." She smiled, a quick, grateful smile. "I won't need it." She walked to the private executive elevator. As she descended, she didn't feel fear. She just felt closure. The final weed, she thought, that needed to be pulled. The lobby of the Ashford Tower was designed for calm. The sound of the water wall, the gentle green light, the smell of fresh earth. It was all meant to lower the blood pressure. But the man standing in the middle of it all was a jangled, discordant note. Mark Peterson was a mess. His suit, once expensive, was now frayed at the cuffs and shiny in the seat. His hair was thinning, and his face was a roadmap of bad choices and cheap whiskey. He was yelling, his voice echoing unpleasantly off the marble. "You don't understand. She's my wife. Well, ex-wife. She owes me. I made her. I paid for everything. Sir, you need to lower your voice," Mr. Johnson, the head of security, was saying, his large hand resting on his belt. Ding! The sound of the executive elevator was quiet, but it cut through the lobby like a blade. Mark spun around. Anna stepped out. She was not the woman he remembered. She wasn't the girl he'd left in the rain. She wasn't even the woman in the Forbes picture. In person, she was terrifying. She was wearing a simple, dark blue sheath dress. Her hair was pulled back, and her eyes, the same eyes that used to look at him with such adoration, were now regarding him with the cool, detached interest of a biologist studying a microbe. "Hello, Mark," she said. Her voice was calm, clear, and carried across the lobby. He was stunned into silence. He had rehearsed this. He was going to be charming. He was going to be apologetic. He was going to remind her of the good times. But looking at her, all the air went out of him. "Anna," he stammered. "My God, you look incredible." "I know," she said simply. "What do you want, Mark?" This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She was supposed to be softer. I wanted to see you, to talk. I've made a terrible mistake, Anna. All these years, I've regretted us." "No," Anna said, taking a step closer. The scent of her perfume, something clean and green, like bamboo, reached him. It smelled expensive. "You don't regret us. You regret your choices. And now you're here because you're out of options." "That's not true," he said, his voice rising in desperation. "Chloe, she was a nightmare. She ruined me. I've been paying for that one night for 5 years. I lost everything." "You lost your job, Mark, and she left you. That's a bad year, not a ruin. You know what ruin is? Ruin is being left in a storm, in a strange part of town, with a dead phone and no money, by the one person who promised to protect you." The lobby was silent, save for the trickle of the water wall. "I'm sorry, Anna," he cried, and for a second he almost believed it. "I am. So sorry. Please, I just need a little help, a leg up, for old times' sake. A job, a loan, anything. You're a billionaire, for God's sake. What's a few thousand to you?" He was pathetic. He saw it now, reflected in her unblinking eyes. "So that's it," Anna said, her voice laced with a profound, weary disappointment. "You're not here for forgiveness. You're here for a handout." "I'm here for what I'm owed," he snapped, his desperation turning to his old, familiar anger. "I supported you. Your dirt blog. Who paid the rent while you were playing with plants? Me. I gave you the 20,000. I funded your new life." Anna actually laughed. It was a short, sharp, humorless sound. $20,000. "Mark the weekly budget for that," she said, pointing to the water wall, "is more than 20,000. That money, that payout, lasted me about 3 months after I paid the deposits on a place to live. It wasn't a fund, it was go-away money." She took one more step, so she was standing directly in front of him. He had to look up at her. He'd never had to look up at Anna before. "Let me be very clear, Mark, so you understand. You didn't make me. You abandoned me. You didn't fund me. You insulted me. The woman you left in the rain, she's gone. She died of exposure on a bus stop bench that night, and from her I grew." "Anna, please," he whispered. He was a drowning man. "You aren't just here because you are broke, Mark," she continued, her voice dropping to a low, cutting whisper. "You're here because you saw my name next to his. You're here because you're still the same shallow, opportunistic man you've always been. You saw my picture and you didn't see me. You saw an asset. Another Stratton account to be landed. That's not true, isn't it? You don't regret me, Mark. You regret my stock portfolio. You regret that you bet on the wrong woman. Chloe was your choice. This gestures to his frayed suit is your consequence. You're not owed anything." She turned to leave. "You bitch!" he roared, the word echoing, ugly and profane, in the beautiful space. "You're just going to leave me? Like this?" Anna paused. She turned back, her face a mask of stone. "No, Mark. I'm not leaving you." She gestured to the glass doors, the rainy Portland street visible beyond. "You're leaving me. Mr. Johnson, please show Mr. Peterson out." "With pleasure, Mrs. Ashford," the security guard said, stepping forward. "You can't do this," Mark yelled as the guard took his arm. "It's already done," Anna said. "Goodbye, Mark." She turned, and without a single look back, she walked to the elevator, pressed the up button, and ascended back to her life. The ding of the executive elevator was the only sound in the atrium, a quiet, silvery chime that cut through the recycled air. Anna turned. She didn't look back at the glass doors where Mr. Johnson was now firmly, but professionally, escorting a sputtering, defeated Mark Peterson onto the rainy sidewalk. She didn't need to. The chapter wasn't just closed. The entire book had been burned, its ashes used as fertilizer for the new life she now inhabited. She walked across the marble floor, her heels clicking with a rhythm of finality. Each step was a world away from the shuffling, squelching walk she had taken from La Fontaine, a walk of humiliation and cold. This walk was a procession. She was not a victim seeking shelter. She was a queen returning to her throne. When the elevator doors slid open, she stepped into the small private car. The walls were a soft, brushed steel, and the light was warm. She saw her reflection. Her eyes were clear. Her makeup was perfect. Her hair, pulled back in its signature no-nonsense twist, was unruffled. She had expected to be shaking. She had expected to feel something, a remnant of the old fear, a pang of pity, a wave of lingering rage. Instead, she felt quiet. A profound, deep, and total quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after a long, violent storm has finally passed, leaving the air clean and sharp. She took a single deep breath, and as she exhaled, she let go of the last, microscopic fragment of Anna Peterson, the woman who had typed her husband's reports, the woman who had believed her dirt blog was a silly hobby, the woman who had hidden in a CVS, ashamed of her generic brand toothpaste. She was gone. Forever. The elevator doors opened, not into a lobby, but onto the 48th floor. It was her world, her floor. Robert Ashford was not in his office, nor was he in hers. He was standing right outside the elevator, his hands in his pockets, his $5,000 suit looking as comfortable as a pair of old jeans. He had clearly been waiting. He had watched everything on the monitor, but he had respected her wish to handle it alone. His face was a mask of concern, but as he saw her, truly saw her, his expression softened into one of overwhelming, fierce pride. "Well," he said, his voice a low rumble, "that was definitive." Anna smiled, a small, genuine smile. "I believe thorough is the word my head engineer would use." Rob didn't move to hug her. He just looked at her, searching her eyes. "Are you all right?" It was the most important question. He wasn't asking if she was safe or scared. He was asking if she, her soul, her center, was intact. "I am," she said, and the truth of it resonated in her own ears. "I'm free." She paused, then corrected herself. "No, that's not right. I've been free for a long time. I just paid off the last lingering debt." "He didn't deserve to be in the same building as you," Rob said, his jaw tightening. The CEO, the protector, was surfacing. "The man who walked in here, he wasn't looking for the woman I know. He was looking for a ghost he thought he could haunt." "He was," Anna agreed, walking past him toward her office. "He was looking for the person he left in the rain. He just couldn't understand that she wasn't there anymore, that she'd been washed away." She entered her office, and it was like stepping from a sterile hallway into a living thing. The experimental orchid wall was in bloom, a riot of impossible purples and whites. Her massive redwood desk was covered in plans for the Seattle rooftop. Rob followed her, leaning against the doorframe, just watching her. He claimed he funded you," Rob said, a note of incredulous disgust in his voice. "With $20,000. Anna laughed. It was a real, throaty laugh this time, full of genuine amusement. She tapped on her main monitor, bringing up a complex, multi-layered budget spreadsheet. "Rob, the revised annual budget for our soil and compost sourcing, just for the Pacific Northwest projects, is $2.8 million, that 20,000. It was just the seed. He didn't know he was throwing it on the most fertile ground he'd ever find." She looked up at him. "He thought I was a delicate hothouse flower. He never realized I was a weed." "A weed?" Rob smiled, walking over to her. "No, my love. You're an old-growth forest. You're a full, complex ecosystem. You don't just grow, you create the environment for others to grow." He placed his hands on her desk, leaning in. "That man, he builds nothing. He just takes. He's a parasite, Anna. And you just, very calmly, removed him." Her intercom buzzed. It was her assistant, David. "Mrs. Ashford?" A reminder. "The delegation from Kensetsu, Tokyo, is set up and waiting in the Sky conference room. They're very eager to see the new bamboo farm proposal." Anna looked at Rob. The ghost was gone. The past was over. The present was calling. She straightened her spine. All business. "Thank you, David. Tell them I'll be there in 2 minutes. And please have my full presentation, the one with the new greywater recycling metrics, cued on the main screen." Right away, Mum. She picked up a tablet and a bound portfolio. Rob stepped back, his eyes alight with adoration. Go get 'em, CEO, he said. I plan to, she said. She walked to the door, paused and looked back at him. And Rob, thank you for letting me be the one to do that. Anna, he said, his voice serious. I'm not your protector. I'm your partner. I was just running security on the perimeter. You handled the battle. She smiled, and this time it was radiant. Good. In that case, don't wait for me for lunch. This meeting is going to run long. I'm not just proposing a bamboo farm. I'm proposing we buy the whole supply chain. She walked out, her footsteps echoing, confident and strong, heading toward a multi-million-dollar deal, leaving the dregs of her old life far, far behind. Down on the street, the automatic glass doors of the Ashford Tower hissed shut, sealing the world of warmth, light, and living green behind an impenetrable wall. Mark Peterson stood on the wet grey concrete, his thin suit jacket already plastered to his skin. The rain was colder this time, or maybe he was just older, with less fire in his belly to keep him warm. You can't, he sputtered at the glass. He saw his own reflection, a gaunt, desperate, middle-aged man, a cliché. Anna, she owes me. Mr. Johnson simply stood inside the lobby, a 250-pound wall of impassive professionalism, his hands clasped behind his back. He didn't even acknowledge Mark's existence. Mark's desperation, his last-ditch attempt at invoking a shared history, had evaporated. All that was left was the raw, acidic burn of complete and total failure. He had just been dismissed, not by a billionaire CEO, not by a titan of industry, but by Anna, the girl who used to iron his shirts, the girl who used to look at him like he was a god. She had looked at him like he was nothing. A nuisance, a piece of gum on her shoe. He stumbled back, the humiliation washing over him in hot, sick waves, far worse than the cold rain. He pulled out his phone, a cheap, cracked smartphone with a pay-as-you-go plan. He had $14.62 in his bank account. Not enough for a hotel, barely enough for a bus ticket out of the city. He had spent his last $50 on a new, second-hand tie, hoping to look the part. He thought of all the people he could call. His friends from the firm? They had scattered the moment his license was suspended. Chloe? He'd seen her face on a Where Are They Now? Reality TV blog. She'd married and been divorced by a 70-year-old Danish count and was now selling wellness crystals on social media. She wouldn't take his call. He was completely, terrifyingly alone. He started to walk, with no destination. The rain plastered his thinning hair to his scalp. He had left Anna in the rain, at night, in a thin dress. It was a cruel, dominant, powerful move. He had been the bull. He had been the man. Now he was the one in the rain. He was the one with no money, no phone, no power. He had become the very ghost he'd come to haunt. His life, he realized, was a perfect, closed loop of irony. He had traded a forest for a plastic flower, and now he was left with just the dirt and a crushing, unending rain. He had no umbrella. He had no car. He had nowhere to go. And for the first time, Mark Peterson, the man who had always had an angle, a plan, a bull market to ride, had nothing left to sell. 6 months later, Anna Ashford stood on a patch of rich, dark earth. She was not on a rooftop in Seattle or in a boardroom in Tokyo. She was in a sprawling, 10-acre greenhouse complex in her old industrial side neighborhood. The glass panes above her steamed in the bright spring sunshine. The sign outside, which she had just unveiled, read, "The Petrov Ashford Community Garden and Culinary Institute. It was her passion project, funded entirely by the Ashford Foundation. It was built on the land Mrs. Petrov had partnered with her on all those years ago. Now, Mrs. Petrov, happily retired and wearing a garish World's Best Gardener t-shirt, was in the front row, holding court. The Institute provided free, organic produce for the entire neighborhood. It ran culinary programs for at-risk youth. It was a living lung for the part of the city that needed it most. Anna was at the podium. She wasn't wearing a power suit. She was in comfortable jeans, scuffed Blundstone boots, and a simple linen shirt, her sleeves rolled up. Her hands, as she gripped the lectern, were smudged with soil. She had just finished planting the first ceremonial tomato vine. "We are taught," she said, her voice amplified by the speakers, carrying over the crowd of community members, reporters, and city officials, that harvest is the end of a process. It's the reward. But that's not true. The harvest is just the middle. The harvest is the proof that the soil is good. It's the promise of seeds for next year. It's the food that gives you the strength to plant more. She looked out at the crowd, and her eyes found him. Rob. He was standing near the back, not stealing her spotlight, but simply being her foundation. He was holding their 4-year-old daughter, Sophie, on his shoulders. Sophie was wearing tiny, ladybug-patterned rain boots and was clutching a bright red watering can. "This," Anna said, her voice thick with an emotion she no longer tried to hide, "is good soil. You are good soil, this community. It gave me a place to put down roots when I thought I had none left. Now, it's our turn to grow together. Thank you." The applause was thunderous. She stepped down, and Sophie immediately wriggled free from Rob's shoulders, running to her. "Mommy, Mommy, Mrs. Petrov let me see the worms. They were so big." Anna laughed, sweeping her daughter up into a muddy hug. Were they? Were they hard at work? "Yes, they're making the dirt," Sophie said, with all the seriousness of a 4-year-old. "That's right, sweetheart," Anna whispered, kissing her daughter's tangled hair. "They're making the dirt. They're the most important part." Rob joined them, sliding his arm around Anna's waist, pulling both of them close. "A good speech, boss," he murmured in her ear. "It was an honest one," she replied, leaning her head on his shoulder. Her life was full, not just with things, the money, the buildings, the magazine covers, but with life itself, with the smell of damp earth, the warmth of her husband's embrace, and the bright, messy joy of her daughter. As they stood there, a family unit, a young intern from the city council office, nervously approached. "Mrs. Ashford, I'm so sorry to bother you. This came to the mayor's office, and they forwarded it to your legal team. It's from a Mr. Mark Peterson." Anna didn't even stiffen. She just looked at the young woman with kindness. Rob, however, felt his posture change. He had, in fact, been dealing with this. After Mark had been removed from the building, a frantic, pathetic, and baseless series of legal letters had begun. The first had been a demand for $10 million in emotional damages and spousal support for contributions to her early career. Rob had wanted to unleash his entire legal department, a shock and awe campaign to bury Mark so deep he'd never be heard from again. Anna had simply shaken her head. She'd handed the letter to her general counsel. "Handle this," she'd said, quietly. "I don't want a war. I just want silence." The case had been laughed out of pre-filing. Now, this new letter. Anna took it from the intern. She didn't open it. She saw the familiar, angry scrawl, the return address from a homeless shelter downtown. She just sighed. Not in anger, not in fear, but in pity. She handed the letter, unopened, to Rob. "I don't need to read that," she said, her voice clear. She then turned back to the intern. "Thank you for letting me know. Now, have you tried the strawberry tarts? Our students made them from our first harvest." She took Sophie's hand. "Come on, Bug, let's go find you a tart." Rob watched her go, the unopened letter in his hand. He looked at the pathetic piece of paper, a last, desperate cry from a man drowning in his own past. Then he looked at his wife, who was laughing as her daughter tried to steal a strawberry. She was right. It was just noise. He tore the letter in half, then in quarters, and dropped it into a nearby compost bin. It would break down, it would be recycled, it would, in its own small, useless way, become part of the dirt. It would become part of the new growth, whether it wanted to or not. Anna, Rob, and Sophie walked through the greenhouse, the light streaming down on them, the air rich with the smell of new beginnings. It was Anna's harvest, and it was bountiful. And that's how Anna closed the door on her past, not with a slam, but with the quiet, powerful click of a lock she now owned. Mark's regret was his own prison, a cold, wet place he had built for himself, the very night he chose a fleeting storm over a lifetime of sunshine. It's a powerful reminder that our choices, especially how we treat the people who support us, are the true building blocks of our future. You can't uproot someone and not expect them to find new, richer soil to grow in. What did you think of Anna's ultimate comeback? Do you believe Mark truly regretted his actions, or was he just regretting his own consequences? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you loved this story of justice, resilience, and transformation, please do me a huge favor and hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded of their own strength. And most importantly, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel for more real-life drama and powerful stories. Don't forget to click that notification bell so you never miss a single upload. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story. The silence in a courtroom is a special kind of heavy. It's not empty. It's filled with the weight of judgment of lives about to be irrevocably changed. For Eleanor Vance, that silence was a suffocating shroud. She sat on a cold, polished bench, staring at the back of her late husband's brother Michael, whose smug confidence radiated from him in waves. She believed she was moments away from being publicly humiliated, cast aside by the man she had loved for 25 years. Every secret meeting he'd had, every hushed phone call in the months before he died, had pointed to one devastating conclusion: Richard had changed his will. And she was about to be left with nothing but memories and a broken heart. She was wrong about everything. Eleanor and Richard Vance had a life that looked like a perfectly curated photograph from a high-end lifestyle magazine. Their home, a sprawling modern masterpiece in the hills of Calabasas, California, was a testament to Richard's genius as a world-renowned architect. It featured clean lines, vast plains of glass, and an infinity pool that seemed to spill directly into the cerulean sky. For 25 years, their marriage had been built on a foundation as solid as the concrete and steel Richard used in his iconic buildings. They were a team. He was the visionary, and she was the anchor, the one who had gracefully stepped away from her own budding career as an art historian, to manage their lives, host the dazzling parties, and create a sanctuary for him to return to after his globe-trotting projects. Their love story was the envy of their social circle. They still held hands, shared private jokes across crowded rooms, and started every morning with coffee on the terrace, watching the sunrise paint the valley in hues of rose and gold. It was a perfect life. Until it wasn't. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday in April. It wasn't a dramatic shattering, but a hairline fracture, almost invisible to the naked eye. Richard came home from a series of medical tests, his face the color of ash. The diagnosis was pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The words hung in the pristine, sun-drenched kitchen like a toxic fog. 6 months, the doctors said. A year if he responded well to the aggressive treatment. In that moment, Eleanor's world tilted on its axis. Her own ambitions, her art, their future travel plans. Everything dissolved into a singular, terrifying focus. Saving Richard. She became his caregiver, his advocate, his unwavering pillar of support. She scheduled appointments, researched alternative therapies, and pureed vegetables into nutrient-rich soups he could barely stomach. But as the disease began its cruel work on his body, a different kind of sickness began to infect their marriage. Richard, once an open book to her, started to become withdrawn. He began taking phone calls in his study, with the door closed, something he had never done before. When she would enter, he'd click his laptop shut with a nervous speed that made her stomach clench. "Just business, honey," he'd say, his voice strained. "Tying up loose ends at the firm, making sure everything is handed over smoothly." Eleanor tried to believe him. It made sense. A man like Richard Vance, whose name was on buildings from Dubai to Tokyo, would have a complex empire to organize. But the secrecy felt different. It was personal. One evening, while bringing him a cup of herbal tea, she overheard him on the phone, his voice low and urgent. "The acquisition has to be discreet, Isabella. No paper trail back to the main accounts. Use the private fund. Yes, I know the price is high, but she's worth it. She's worth everything. Isabella." The name was like a shard of glass in her heart. Eleanor stood frozen outside the door, the tea tray trembling in her hands. Who was Isabella? He had never mentioned an Isabella. The phrase "she's worth it" played on a loop in her mind. Each repetition, twisting the knife deeper. She backed away silently, her mind racing. Was this a colleague, a broker? Or was it something else? A week later, while tidying his desk, she found a receipt from a high-end jewelry store. Gelson's of Beverly Hills, a custom-designed sapphire necklace. The cost was astronomical. It wasn't for her. Her birthday and their anniversary had long passed. The receipt was tucked inside a brochure for a private gallery showing, and on the brochure, a name was circled in Richard's familiar scrawl, Isabella Rossi, curator. The pieces began to click into place, forming a picture of betrayal so ugly it made her physically ill. The late-night calls, the closed-door meetings, the expensive gifts. Richard wasn't just tying up loose ends. He was building a new life, a future with someone else. A younger woman, no doubt. A beautiful art curator named Isabella. He was spending their money, their shared fortune, on this other woman, while she, Eleanor, spent her days measuring out his medication and holding his hand through nauseating chemotherapy sessions. The secure foundation of their 25-year marriage had fractured, and through the cracks, Eleanor could see a terrifying abyss opening up beneath her. The man she was dedicating her every waking moment to was betraying her in the most profound way imaginable, and she was utterly alone with the terrible secret. Doubt, once planted, grows with the tenacity of a weed, its roots strangling everything beautiful around it. Eleanor's doubt was nurtured by a constant stream of unsettling discoveries. She started to look for things, a conscious and self-destructive act of picking at a wound. She checked their bank statements online, something she hadn't done in years. She found multiple large withdrawals from a private account she barely knew existed, the same one Richard had mentioned on the phone. The transfers were labeled simply as acquisitions. She confided in her best friend, Sarah Jenkins, over a tense lunch at a quiet cafe. Sarah, a fiercely protective divorcee, listened with a frown, her fork stilled over her quinoa salad. "Eleanor, I love you, but you need to wake up and smell the betrayal," Sarah said, her voice sharp but laced with concern. "Men do this, especially powerful men when they're facing their own mortality. They want to feel Alib desired. They look for a last hurrah." "But Richard," Eleanor whispered the name, catching in her throat. "After everything we've been through, while I'm holding him, cleaning up after him, watching him fade away. It's the classic playbook." Sarah insisted, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. "He's ensuring his new friend is taken care of. You need to protect yourself, Ellie. You need to see a lawyer. Now. Before he drains everything." Eleanor resisted the idea, feeling like a betrayal in itself. But Sarah's words echoed in her mind. Protect yourself. The thought was alien. For 25 years, her identity was intertwined with Richard's. There was no her to protect, only us. But now us felt like a lie. Her descent into suspicion became an obsession. She hired a private investigator, a man named Frank Miller, whose cheap suit and world-weary eyes made her feel ashamed. The fee was exorbitant, but she paid it from her personal savings, the art fund she had maintained since before her marriage. The investigator's first report landed in her email inbox a week later. It was a single photograph that knocked the air from her lungs. It was Richard, looking gaunt, but dressed impeccably in a beige suit, sitting at an outdoor table at a chic cafe in Malibu. Across from him sat a woman. She was breathtakingly beautiful, with long dark hair, olive skin, and a vibrant smile. She was laughing, her head tilted back, and Richard was looking at her with an expression Eleanor hadn't seen on his face in months. It was a look of pure, unadulterated delight. The caption below the photo read, "Richard Vance with Isabella Rossi, 15 p.m. The Coastal Grill." Eleanor slammed her laptop shut. The visual proof was a gut punch. This wasn't a business meeting. This was intimate. This was the woman he was buying sapphires for. This was the woman who was stealing the last precious months of her husband's life. That night, she decided to confront him. She found him in his study, staring out the large window at the city lights twinkling below. He looked so fragile, his frame swallowed by his favorite cashmere robe. For a moment, her resolve wavered. But then she pictured him laughing with Isabella. "Richard, we need to talk," she said, her voice trembling slightly. She held up a printout of the photograph. "Who is she?" Richard turned his eyes, tired but clear. He glanced at the photo, and his expression didn't change. There was no guilt, no surprise, just a deep, weary sadness. "Eleanor, please, don't do this. Don't do this," she cried, her voice rising. "I'm taking care of you, Richard. I'm watching you die. And you're out having cozy lunches and buying jewelry for some woman named Isabella. Who is she? Are you in love with her?" "It's not what you think," he said, softly, taking a step towards her. "Then what is it?" she demanded, backing away. "I found the bank statements, the private fund, the money you're spending. Are you changing your will?" Are you leaving everything to her? The question hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. Richard's face, already pale, seemed to lose all its remaining color. He looked at her, and for the first time she saw not just sadness in his eyes, but a flicker of what looked like hurt. "Eleanor," he said, his voice raspy, "after all our years together, can't you just trust me? Please. I need you to trust me on this." But trust was a luxury she could no longer afford. His plea, meant to be reassuring, sounded like the most profound of dismissals. He wasn't denying it. He was asking for a blank check of faith while he systematically dismantled their life. "Trust you," she repeated the word, tasting like acid. "I don't even know who you are anymore." She turned and fled the room, leaving him standing alone in the dark. The conversation was a confirmation of her worst fears. He hadn't denied changing the will. He hadn't explained Isabella. He had simply asked for trust, a shield to hide behind, while he sharpened the blade. From that day on, Eleanor continued her duties as a caregiver, but her heart was encased in ice. She was no longer a loving wife. She was a warden, counting down the days to her own financial and emotional execution. The months that followed were a surreal and agonizing blend of intimate care and profound emotional distance. On the surface, Eleanor was the picture of devotion. She learned to administer his injections, manage the complex cocktail of painkillers that kept him comfortable, and read to him for hours from his favorite books on architectural history. She held the basin for him when the chemotherapy made him sick and gently bathed him when he was too weak to stand. She performed these acts with a numb, methodical efficiency, her hands moving with a tenderness that her heart no longer felt. Inside, she was a roiling sea of resentment and fear. Every touch felt like a lie. Every kind word he spoke to her felt like a calculated deception. He was dying, and she was mourning, not just the impending loss of his life, but the death of the man she thought she had married. Richard's younger brother, Michael Vance, became a frequent visitor. Michael was Richard's opposite in every way. Where Richard was reserved, brilliant, and elegant, Michael was loud, perpetually aggrieved, and carried the air of a man who believed the world owed him something. He ran a small, perpetually struggling real estate firm, and had always lived in his older brother's long shadow, a fact that had curdled into a permanent layer of envy. Michael would arrive with cheap flowers and an expensive bottle of wine, which he would mostly drink himself, and settle in for long, rambling monologues about his business deals. He treated Eleanor with a cloying, condescending pity that set her teeth on edge. "You're a saint, Eleanor, a real saint," he'd say, patting her hand while his eyes scanned the expensive art on the walls. "Don't know how you do it. My brother, he can be a complicated man, very private, always has been." He seemed to sense the schism between Eleanor and Richard, and like a predator sensing a weakness, he began to exploit it. During one visit, he found Eleanor alone in the kitchen, staring blankly out the window. Heard him on the phone with his lawyer again. Michael said, his tone conspiratorial as he topped up his wine glass. Something about updating his final wishes, making some significant adjustments. He told me he wanted to make sure everything was put right before the end. Eleanor's blood ran cold. Significant adjustments. Put right. The words confirmed her deepest fears. Richard was cutting her out, and he was telling his brother about it. He said that she asked her voice barely a whisper. Clear as day, Michael confirmed, taking a deep gulp of wine. Told me that people's priorities change at the end. That he had to honor a new commitment. "I'm just looking out for you, Ellie. You've given him the best years of your life. Don't let him throw you away like an old shoe." Michael's words, intended to sound like concern, were nothing more than gasoline on the fire of her paranoia. He was positioning himself, she realized. If she was out of the picture, he, as Richard's only sibling, would be the likely heir. He was subtly aligning himself with her, pretending to be her ally, while waiting to pick over the bones of her marriage. The house, once a sanctuary of love and light, became a silent battlefield. Eleanor and Richard moved around each other like ghosts. The shared jokes and easy intimacy were gone, replaced by a tense, polite formality. He would often watch her with a pained expression, as if he wanted to say something, but the wall between them was now too high, too thick. He tried once more a few weeks before the end. "Ellie." He rasped his hand, now skeletal, reaching for hers. "The things I've been doing, the arrangements, it's all for you. It's always been for you." She pulled her hand away, the gesture sharp and involuntary. "Please, Richard, don't lie to me. Not now." The hurt that flashed in his eyes was so profound that it almost broke through her armor, but she held firm. She had seen the photograph. She had heard the phone calls. She had Michael's confirmation. To believe Richard now would be to make a fool of herself. His words were just the final cruel twist of the knife, an attempt to paint himself as a saint before he left her destitute. The last week of Richard's life was a blur of hospice nurses, hushed conversations, and the ever-present hum of the oxygen machine. Eleanor sat by his bedside, holding his hand out of a sense of duty, her mind a million miles away, calculating her next steps. She imagined the humiliation, the legal battles, the pitying looks from their friends. She envisioned herself having to sell the house, her home, and move into a small, lonely apartment, her future erased by a woman named Isabella Rossi. When Richard Vance took his final, shuddering breath on a cool September morning, Eleanor felt a strange and terrible mix of emotions. There was grief deep and primal for the man she had once loved, but underneath it, cold and hard as a river stone, was a grim sense of resolve. The war of attrition was over. The battle for her future was about to begin. The funeral was a grand, somber affair, befitting a man of Richard Vance's stature. The modernist chapel he had once designed himself was filled with titans of industry, celebrated artists, and society figures, as all murmuring condolences to the grieving widow. Eleanor moved through the proceedings in a haze, dressed in a simple but elegant black dress, a veil shielding her face. She accepted hugs and expressions of sympathy, with a detached grace playing the part of the heartbroken wife, while her mind was consumed with a cold dread. Michael was by her side throughout, a self-appointed master of ceremonies. He greeted guests with a somber handshake, his face a mask of sorrow that didn't quite reach his eyes. He was already acting as if he were the new patriarch of the Vance family. A terrible loss, he'd say to a guest, his arm draped possessively around Eleanor's shoulder. But Richard was prepared. He got his affairs in order. He made his final wishes crystal clear. Each time he said it, it was a small public jab at her, a reminder of the impending doom. The week after the funeral, the vultures truly began to circle. The first to call was Richard's lawyer, a stern, old-world gentleman named Arthur Abernathy. He informed Eleanor that the reading of the will would take place in 2 weeks at the probate court, a formality required due to the size of the estate, and he hinted potential for dispute. Potential for dispute? Eleanor asked, her heart sinking. "It is always wise to be prepared for any eventuality, Mrs. Vance," Mr. Abernathy said in his dry non-committal tone. He refused to elaborate, citing his duty to his late client. The next call was from Michael, "Just got off the phone with Abernathy," he said, his voice brimming with false camaraderie. "So it's official. Look, Ellie, I want you to know whatever happens, I'm here for you. Richard told me he made changes to provide for the family. That's me. But I'll make sure you're not left out in the cold. You can stay in the house for a few months, get yourself sorted." The sheer audacity of his offer was breathtaking. He was already carving up her life magnanimously, offering her a few months' stay in her own home. The implication was clear: he expected to inherit the bulk of the estate, including the house. Eleanor spent the next 2 weeks in a state of suspended animation. The cavernous house echoed with a silence that was far more oppressive than the sounds of Richard's illness. She wandered from room to room, touching the objects they had collected over a lifetime. A sculpture from Japan, a painting from a then unknown artist in Paris, a hand-carved wooden bowl from Africa. Each object was a memory, and each memory was now tainted with the bitter taste of betrayal. These weren't their treasures anymore. They were assets to be liquidated, part of an estate she would have no claim to. Sarah urged her to hire a litigator to prepare to contest the will. "You have rights as his wife of 25 years, Ellie spousal rights. You can't let him do this to you from beyond the grave." But Eleanor felt paralyzed. Contesting the will would mean airing their dirty laundry in public. It would mean fighting against a ghost, and she felt she had already lost. Her energy was gone, drained by months of caregiving and emotional turmoil. All she could muster was a bleak, fatalistic resolve to see it through, to face the humiliation head-on, and then somehow figure out how to rebuild her life from the ashes. The night before the reading, she couldn't sleep. She found herself in Richard's study, the room she had avoided since his death. It still smelled faintly of him, of his cologne, of old books and paper. On his desk, perfectly aligned, was a single sealed envelope made of thick cream-colored paper. Her name, Eleanor, was written on the front in his distinctive architectural handwriting. Her fingers trembled as she reached for it. Was this it? A final letter of explanation, an apology, a confession. She held it in her hands, the paper cool against her skin. She wanted to tear it open to know the truth, but she couldn't. She was afraid that the words inside would be the final, definitive confirmation of her failure of his betrayal. She decided to wait. She would bring it with her to the courthouse. She would face the legal verdict first, and then, only then, would she read his final words to her. She placed the letter in her handbag, a final piece of evidence in the trial of her own marriage. The probate courtroom was a cold, impersonal space designed to strip emotion from the proceedings of life and death. The walls were a sterile beige, the air was stale, and the fluorescent lights hummed with an irritating monotony. Eleanor sat at a long, polished table next to her lawyer, a quiet man Sarah had insisted she hire at the last minute. Across from them sat Michael, flanked by his own aggressive-looking attorney. Michael gave her a small, pitying nod, the look of a victor offering condolences to the vanquished. Eleanor clutched her handbag in her lap, the crisp edges of Richard's letter, a constant, terrifying presence against her fingers. She felt small and exposed under the dispassionate gaze of the judge, an older woman named Judge Miller, whose face was etched with the weary patience of someone who had witnessed every form of human greed and sorrow. Mr. Abernathy Richards' lawyer stood before the judge, his back ramrod straight. He cleared his throat, and the rustling in the courtroom ceased. "We are gathered for the reading of the last will and testament of Richard Allen Vance, executed on August 10th of this year." Mr. Abernathy began, his voice echoing slightly in the quiet room. Eleanor's breath hitched. August 10th. That was just a month before he died, deep in the throes of his secret life with Isabella. This was it. The new will. The one that would erase her. Mr. Abernathy began to read through the preliminary legal language, the formal declarations, the appointment of himself as executor, the clauses covering debts and funeral expenses. It was a drone of legalese that seemed to stretch on for an eternity. Eleanor's mind drifted. She saw Richard's face laughing with Isabella at that cafe. She heard his voice on the phone. She's worth everything. She felt the weight of Michael's smug stare from across the table. Each word from the lawyer was a tick of the clock counting down to her public dispossession. "And so we move to the disposition of assets," Mr. Abernathy announced, drawing her back to the present. The room felt suddenly colder. This was the core of it. He detailed a few minor bequests, a donation of £100,000 to the Architectural Heritage Foundation, a vintage watch to his long-time assistant, a collection of first-edition books to his alma mater. Each one was a small, neat cut, slicing away pieces of the life they had built. Michael leaned forward in his chair, a hungry look in his eyes. His lawyer had a pen poised over a legal pad. Regarding the primary estate, Mr. Abernathy continued, his voice steady, which includes all properties domestic and international, all stock portfolios, liquid assets, art collections and controlling shares in Vance Architecture International, the total value of which is estimated at $15,800,000. He paused, taking a sip of water. The silence stretched taut and unbearable. Eleanor closed her eyes, bracing herself for the blow. She could feel her own heartbeat, a frantic, panicked drumming in her ears. Here it comes, she thought. The end of my life as I know it. Mr. Abernathy put down his glass and looked directly at Eleanor. His expression was for the first time not entirely neutral. There was a flicker of something else there, something she couldn't decipher. He read the next line, the words clear, precise, and utterly world-shattering. "I bequeath the entirety of my estate, without condition or reservation, to my beloved wife, Eleanor Christine Vance." The words from Mr. Abernathy's mouth were a formal, droning litany of legal terminology that barely penetrated the thick fog of Eleanor's dread. Her entire consciousness was coiled into a single tight knot of anticipation in the pit of her stomach. She stared at the polished grain of the table in front of her, tracing the whirls of wood, with her eyes focusing on anything but the impending verbal guillotine. She could feel the physical presence of Michael's smugness from across the room. It was an oily, suffocating pressure in the air. He was leaning slightly forward, a predator poised to strike his lawyer beside him, looking equally confident. They believed, as she did, that they were mere moments away from a spectacular victory. "And so we move to the disposition of the primary estate," Mr. Abernathy announced, the shift in his tone cutting through her haze. This was it. The air in the room seemed to thin, becoming sharp and difficult to breathe. Eleanor instinctively braced herself, her hands clenching the leather of her handbag, so tightly her knuckles were white. The letter inside felt like a block of ice against her fingers. Abernathy detailed the minor bequests first, the donation, the watch, the books. Each one felt like the deliberate, theatrical clearing of a stage before the main event. Michael shifted impatiently in his seat. Regarding the primary estate, Abernathy continued, his voice unwavering, as he listed the assets that constituted her entire world. All properties, domestic and international, all stock portfolios, liquid assets, art collections, and controlling shares in Vance Architecture International, the total value of which is estimated at $15,800,000. He paused, a purely professional gesture to take a sip of water, but it felt like a dramatic device of exquisite cruelty. The silence stretched thin and taut. Eleanor shut her eyes. She pictured Richard's face not as the loving husband she remembered from their youth, but the secretive, distant man of the last 6 months. She saw him laughing with Isabella. She heard Michael's poisonous whispers in her ear. "He's throwing you away, like an old shoe." The blow was coming. She was ready. Then Mr. Abernathy placed his glass down with a soft click, looked not at the judge, not at Michael, but directly at her, and read the decisive clause. His words were not shouted, but they landed with the force of a thunderclap in the silent room. "I bequeath the entirety of my estate without condition or reservation to my beloved wife, Eleanor Christine Vance." The sentence did not compute. It was as if he had spoken in a foreign language. Eleanor's eyes snapped open, her mind scrambling to process a reality so diametrically opposed to the one she had meticulously constructed. My beloved wife, in her entirety. The words echoed in the cavernous space of her disbelief. It wasn't relief that washed over her, but a profound, dizzying and nauseating confusion. It had to be a mistake. Perhaps it was the old will. Perhaps Abernathy had brought the wrong document. A loud, strangled gasp from across the table confirmed she had heard correctly. Michael Vance shot to his feet, his chair scraping violently against the floor. His face, moments before a mask of smug satisfaction, was now a grotesque canvas of mottled red and purple disbelief. "No! That is impossible!" he bellowed, his voice cracking with fury. "That's the old will. He changed the will. Read the correct one." His own lawyer, mortified, tugged at his sleeve. "Michael, sit down," he hissed. "He told me." Michael raged, ignoring him and pointing a trembling finger at Abernathy. "He told me he was making adjustments. He said he had new commitments to honor. He was providing for his family. This is a fraud." Judge Miller, who had been observing the proceedings with a stony impassivity, now leaned forward, her gaze like chips of ice. "Mr. Vance, this is your only warning. You will control yourself and sit down, or I will have you removed for contempt of court." The document presented was executed on August 10th of this year. "Is that not correct, Mr. Abernathy?" "It is, Your Honor," Abernathy confirmed calmly. The date just a month before Richard died sent another shockwave through Eleanor. This wasn't the old will. This was the new one. The one he'd made while secretly meeting Isabella. The logic of her world completely fractured. Michael collapsed back into his chair as if his strings had been cut, his face a picture of apoplectic rage and utter humiliation. He was openly sputtering, whispering impossible, impossible to his frantic lawyer. Mr. Abernathy waited for silence to be restored before he spoke again, his voice carrying a new weight of significance. "Your Honor, there is a final codicil. It pertains directly to this situation." Mr. Vance attached a personal letter to the will with the express and legally binding instruction that it be read aloud at this proceeding if and only if any party formally contested the primary bequest. The room fell into an even deeper silence. Richard had anticipated this. He had known his brother's greed so perfectly that he had set a trap for it, and Michael had just walked straight into it. Judge Miller's eyes narrowed on Michael. "Mr. Vance, your outburst has been noted as a formal contestation. Mr. Abernathy, you are instructed to proceed." Abernathy reached into his briefcase and produced a thick, cream-colored envelope. Eleanor's heart leaped into her throat. It was identical to the one in her handbag. He unsealed it with a crisp tear and unfolded the single sheet of paper within. He began to read. The words were Richard's, and they filled the cold, sterile courtroom with a warmth and intimacy that was almost unbearable. My dearest Eleanor. Abernathy read his voice, channeling the gentle gravity of his late client. If you are hearing this letter, it means two things. First, that I am gone, and second, that someone in this room, likely my dear brother Michael, has let his greed get the better of his grief. I anticipated this, which is why I am writing to you now, to explain the things I could not explain in my final months. Abernathy paused. Eleanor could feel every eye in the room on her, but she saw only the image of Richard at his desk, carefully penning these last words. I know you were suspicious, my love. I know you were hurting. I saw the doubt in your eyes, and it was a greater pain to me than anything the cancer could do. I know you found out about Isabella, about the money, about the secret meetings. I know what you thought, and I am so sorry for the silence I was forced to keep. A hot wave of shame washed over Eleanor. He had seen it all. He had known. You gave up your career for me, Eleanor. You put your passion for art history, your brilliant eye on hold to build our life. I never forgot that sacrifice. So when I received my diagnosis, I knew I couldn't leave you with just money. Money is cold. I had to leave you with a purpose, a passion, your passion. Isabella Rossi is not my lover, my darling. She is one of the most respected private art curators in Europe. I hired her months ago. The secret fund, the acquisitions, the trips you thought were for affairs, it was all for a project. Our final project. The world tilted. Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth as a soft gasp escaped her lips. Isabella, an art curator. The sapphire necklace you found the receipt for. It wasn't a necklace. It was the sapphire, a small, exquisite, abstract sculpture by the artist Henri Dubois that I knew you admired. The payments to Gelsons were for a rare Monet they had acquired privately, a painting of water lilies I knew you dreamed of seeing every day. Every withdrawal, every secret meeting was me, with Isabella's guidance, buying art. Your kind of art, the kind that makes your eyes light up. The ugly truth she had clung to for months dissolved into dust, revealing a truth so beautiful it was agonizing. Tears began to stream down her face, not of grief, but of a revelation so profound it felt like a physical blow. The project is a private art gallery, a small, beautiful building I designed myself located in downtown Los Angeles. It's finished, and it's stocked with the entire collection we've been acquiring. I kept it a secret because I wanted to hand you the keys to the finished gallery myself. I didn't want you to worry about the cost to be burdened by the logistics while you were caring for me. I wanted it to be a perfect, complete gift, a new beginning built on the foundation of our love. The gallery is called the Eleanor Vance Gallery. It, along with everything else, is yours. It was always for you. Please forgive me for the way I had to do it. My only defense is that I loved you too much to do it any other way. With all my love for all time, Richard. When Abernathy's voice stopped, the silence that followed was absolute sacred. It was filled with the immensity of one man's love and one woman's dawning, heart-breaking comprehension. Eleanor sat weeping without sound, her entire body shaking with the force of her regret and the overwhelming beauty of his final act. Across the room, Michael Vance was a statue of ash, his ruin complete and absolute. Judge Miller surveyed the scene, her expression for once stripped of its judicial austerity. She looked at Michael, then at his lawyer, who looked utterly defeated. "Counselor," she said softly to Michael's attorney, "do you wish to withdraw your client's contestation?" The lawyer stood, not even bothering to confer with his client. "Yes, Your Honor. We withdraw the contestation with apologies to the court and to Mrs. Vance." "Wise decision." Judge Miller said, her voice regaining its firmness. She looked at Eleanor with a flicker of something that looked almost like kindness. "Probate is granted. The estate of Richard Vance will be transferred to Mrs. Vance in its entirety. This court is adjourned." With the final sharp bang of a gavel, it was over. The legal proceeding had ended, but for Eleanor, the true reckoning had just begun. The sharp, definitive crack of Judge Miller's gavel was not an end, but a violent beginning. It shattered the thick, distorted glass of Eleanor's reality, and the world came rushing in, raw and overwhelming. For a moment, she didn't move. The courtroom began to empty the sounds of shuffling feet and murmured conversations muffled as if she were under water. Her own lawyer, a kind but ineffectual man named Mr. Peterson, gently touched her arm. "Mrs. Vance, it's over. You're all right." Was she all right? She felt as if she had been flayed open, every nerve ending, exposed to a truth so searing it was almost unbearable. The shame was a physical sensation, a hot, creeping flush that started in her chest and spread through her entire body. She thought of Richard in his final months, his pained, pleading eyes, his gentle attempts to reach her. "Can't you just trust me?" he had asked. And she had answered with coldness, with suspicion, with the vulgarity of a private investigator. She had held his hand as he died, her heart full of resentment for a crime he had never committed. The hypocrisy of it threatened to choke her. Across the room, she saw Michael. He was no longer the smug victor, but a shrunken, pathetic figure. His face was slack with shock, his expensive suit suddenly looking too big for his diminished frame. His lawyer was packing a briefcase with brisk, angry movements, avoiding eye contact with his client. As Michael turned to leave, his gaze met Eleanor's for a fleeting second. There was no anger left in his eyes, only a hollow, defeated emptiness. He had gambled on his brother's betrayal and lost everything exposed in a public forum as a man motivated by nothing but avarice. He turned away, a man erased from the narrative, and disappeared through the courtroom doors. It was Mr. Abernathy who approached her. Then his stern demeanor softened by a look of profound sympathy. He had known the truth all along. He had been Richard's confidant, the silent keeper of this grand secret promise. "Eleanor," he said, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. Richard was very specific in his instructions. He worried this would be difficult for you to understand at first. I had no idea." She whispered the words, feeling pitifully inadequate. He handed her a single, heavy, modern-looking key attached to a simple leather fob, along with a card. "He asked that I give you this. The address is on the card. He said you would know what to do when you saw it." Abernathy paused, his gaze direct. "For what it's worth, in my 35 years of practicing law, I have never drafted a document more filled with love than your husband's final will. The project, it was all he talked about. It gave him strength." The lawyer's words were a small, precious balm on her wounded soul. She clutched the key, its metal cool and solid in her trembling hand. It felt like the only real thing in the world. She thanked him, her voice thick with unshed tears, and walked out of the courthouse, leaving Mr. Peterson to handle the remaining paperwork. The Los Angeles sun was blindingly bright. The city felt alien, the familiar streets and buildings rendered strange and new. She didn't want to go home to the house in Calabasas, a place that now felt like a crime scene filled with the ghosts of her own terrible assumptions. She got into her car, the engine humming to life, and looked at the address on the card. It was downtown in the Arts District. The drive was a pilgrimage through a landscape of regret. Every red light, every passing billboard triggered a fresh wave of memory, each one recontextualized by the crushing weight of the truth. She remembered a late-night phone call she'd overheard Richard arguing passionately about provenance and condition reports. She had assumed he was discussing a secret asset for Isabella. Now she realized he must have been on the phone with a gallery in London, or a dealer in Tokyo fighting for a piece he knew she would love. She recalled him hunched over his laptop, which she had assumed was for secret emails. He had likely been in a bidding war at a Sotheby's online auction, a warrior fighting for beauty on her behalf. The cruelty of her suspicion was a physical ache. He had been building her a palace, and she had been accusing him of digging her a grave. He was dying, his body failing him, yet he had marshaled his remaining energy not to rage or despair, but to create, to build one last testament, not to his own ego, but to her soul. The address led her to a quiet, tree-lined street she had only vaguely known existed. And there it was. The building was a masterpiece of quiet confidence. It wasn't large or ostentatious, but every line was perfect. The facade was a stunning interplay of white travertine marble and warm, vertically aligned teak wood. A cantilevered roof provided a sliver of shade over a minimalist entrance, and a single floor-to-ceiling plane of glass offered a tantalizing glimpse of a light-filled interior. It was Richard's architectural language evolved and perfected a structure that was both powerful and serene. And above the brushed steel door handle, mounted directly onto the travertine, were the words that made her knees weak. In a clean, elegant font, the letters spelled out her name, the Eleanor Vance Gallery. Her name. Not his. He had made her the landmark. He had made her the legacy. She reached out and touched the cool stone beneath the letters, her fingers tracing her own identity. An identity she felt she no longer deserved. As if sensing her presence, the glass door opened. A young woman with long, dark hair and intelligent, compassionate eyes stepped out. She was beautiful just as she had been in the private investigator's photograph, but there was no malice in her face, only a gentle sorrow. It was Isabella Rossi. "Mrs. Vance," Isabella said, her voice soft with a faint Italian accent. "Mr. Abernathy called to let me know you might be coming. Please come in. I am so deeply sorry for your loss." Eleanor looked at the woman she had demonized, the woman she had pictured as a home wrecker, and all she could see was a partner in her husband's love. The venom and hatred she had harbored for months evaporated, leaving behind a hollow ache of shame. "No," Eleanor said, her voice cracking. "I am the one who is sorry. For what I thought. For what I suspected. I am so sorry." Isabella gave a small, sad smile. "Richard told me you might feel that way. He regretted the secrecy more than you can know. He said, she will hate me for a while, but she will understand in the end. And what I'm building for her is meant to last longer than her anger." She gestured inside. "He wanted you to see it. He talked about the moment you would first walk through these doors, nearly every day." Eleanor took a deep breath and stepped across the threshold, leaving her old life on the pavement behind her. The interior was even more beautiful than the outside hinted. It was a single, glorious space a sanctuary of light. The ceiling soared to double height, and the polished concrete floors reflected the soft ambient glow from a series of expertly hidden skylights. The air smelled of fresh paintwood and possibility. And then she saw the art. It was not just a collection. It was a conversation. It was 25 years of their life together, curated and displayed with breathtaking love. She began to walk slowly as if in a dream. To her right hung a vibrant, chaotic painting by the contemporary Spanish artist Miquel Barceló. She remembered standing before one of his works with Richard in a Madrid museum on their 10th anniversary, telling him how she adored its raw, earthy energy. He had simply squeezed her hand and said, "I see why." Further on a low pedestal, sat a delicate, impossibly intricate bronze sculpture by a Japanese artist she had once written a paper on in graduate school. She had thought the artist was too obscure, that no one remembered her work. Richard had remembered. She saw the small, shimmering Monet of the water lilies, Le Bassin aux Nymphéas, and she was transported back to a rainy Sunday afternoon, 20 years ago, curled up on the sofa, with Richard, an art book, open on her lap. "Can you imagine?" She had sighed, owning a piece of that light. Now she did. Isabella walked with her a respectful distance away, offering quiet context when needed. "Richard acquired this one from a private estate in Geneva," she said, gesturing to a striking black-and-white photograph. "He said you once mentioned this photographer changed the way you looked at shadows." Every piece was a memory. Every painting was a conversation he had listened to. Every sculpture was a dream she had once idly expressed. This wasn't just an art collection bought with a rich man's money. This was an archive of her heart. She finally came to the piece she had been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. There, in a place of honor, illuminated by a single focused light, was the sapphire. It was not a necklace. It was a stunning abstract sculpture by Henri Dubois, a swirling dynamic form carved from a single piece of lapis lazuli, shot through with veins of pyrite that glittered like distant stars. It was magnificent, capturing the depth and mystery of a midnight sky. She reached out her fingers, hovering just above its cool surface. This beautiful object, this testament to his love, had been the cornerstone of her ugly, jealous fantasies. At the very back of the gallery, overlooking a small, serene garden, with a single Japanese maple tree, was a simple teak bench. Set into the wall above it was a small, unassuming bronze plaque. Eleanor walked toward it, her legs unsteady, and read the simple, devastating inscription. "For Eleanor, my anchor, my inspiration, my love. May this place of beauty bring you the joy you have always brought me. R.V." That was it. The directness, the simplicity, the overwhelming love contained in those few words broke through the last of her defenses. She sank onto the bench, and the dam of her tightly controlled grief finally burst. She wept. She wept for the magnificent man she had lost, and for the suspicious, untrusting wife she had become. She cried for the beautiful secret he had carried alone, for the pain he must have felt, watching her turn away from him when he needed her most. They were tears of grief, of shame, of regret, but also of a gratitude so immense, so profound, it felt as big as the sky. It was a cleansing flood, washing away the poison of the past few months, and leaving in its place the pure, unvarnished truth of a 25-year love story. She didn't know how long she sat there, Isabella having slipped away to give her privacy. But when the tears finally subsided, the crushing weight in her chest had lifted, replaced by a quiet, steely resolve. Richard was gone, but he had left her a map. He had left her a mission. This gallery was not a memorial to a life that was over. It was a blueprint for a life that was just beginning. It was a place for her to work, to create, to share the beauty he had gathered for her. It was his final perfect act of love, a gift not of what he was, but of who she could be. Her purpose, which she thought had vanished with his last breath, was right here, surrounding her, waiting for her to claim it. Eleanor's story is a powerful, heart-wrenching reminder of how easily suspicion can blind us, and how love can manifest in the most unexpected ways. It's a testament to the fact that sometimes the greatest betrayals we experience are the ones we inflict upon ourselves by refusing to trust. Have you ever jumped to a conclusion about someone you love, only to find out the reality was completely different? How do you think you would have reacted in Eleanor's shoes? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. This story shows that love, trust, and communication are the true treasures in any relationship. If this story moved you, please give this video a like and share it with someone who appreciates a story of profound love and surprising twists. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you won't miss our next real-life drama. Thank you for listening.